Some second chances come with a price. 1 year after walking away from everything he'd built, just as Wanda had once walked away from him, Sebastian Pemberton had finally found purpose beyond power. And on the rare evenings Wanda Reeves allowed him into her world again, he'd begun to believe redemption was possible. But someone was determined to ensure they both paid for their past. The anonymous financial attacks had seemed random at first, her minority business clients mysteriously losing funding, his youth center facing inexplicable permit denials. Only when the devastating truth finally emerged did they realize how perfectly they'd been played. Their enemies hadn't been targeting them separately. Every attack had been designed to drive them back into each other's arms. And the puppet master orchestrating their destruction was someone who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push to make them dance to an invisible tune. Now, as Sebastian watched the woman he'd never stopped loving discover just how deep the deception ran, he faced an impossible choice. Reveal the one secret that would destroy any chance of winning her back, or become the very thing she'd once walked away from, a man who chose protection over truth. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our royal story family. Your throne in this kingdom of stories is waiting for you. The passionate journey continues with two hearts finding their way back to each other against impossible odds. Sebastian stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Brooklyn loft, the late afternoon sunlight casting his tall figure in silhouette. His reflection showed a man transformed from the ruthless CEO he'd been a year ago. His custom-tailored suits had given way to premium dark jeans and a supple charcoal Henley that did nothing to disguise his athletic build. His blonde hair, once meticulously styled for boardroom dominance, now had a slightly tousled quality that matched his more relaxed surroundings. But his ice-blue eyes remained unchanged, intense, observant, seeing patterns where others saw only chaos. Those eyes now focused on the framed photograph in his hands. 15 teenagers in matching navy hoodies emblazoned with BYTI across the chest, standing proudly in front of a renovated warehouse. The Brooklyn Youth Technology Initiative, his redemption project, his attempt to create something that served a purpose beyond profit margins and market share. They're really something, aren't they? The voice belonged to Maya Chen, his program director, who approached with 2 mugs of coffee. She offered one to Sebastian, her slender fingers brushing his as he accepted it. Her Harvard MBA and stint as lead developer at Apex Digital made her overqualified for a non-profit, but she'd taken the dramatic pay cut with apparent enthusiasm. "James got the official acceptance package from Google this morning," Sebastian said, tapping one teenager's face in the photo. "Full scholarship, internship guaranteed. Kid was dealing drugs 18 months ago." Maya smiled, standing perhaps a fraction too close. "That's the 3rd scholarship this semester. The Times reporter is coming tomorrow for the feature. This could mean national expansion funding." Sebastian nodded, stepping away subtly to maintain professional distance. Maya was brilliant, beautiful, and made no secret of her interest in him. Yet whenever those moments arose, his mind invariably drifted to another woman who'd earned his respect, even as she'd walked away from him. "I should head out," he said, checking his watch. "Meeting downtown." Maya's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched knowingly. "With Miss Reeves again? 3rd time this month." "Just coffee," Sebastian replied, his tone ending further discussion. 20 minutes later, Sebastian entered the small cafe 3 blocks from the financial district, scanning the room until he found her. Wanda Reeves sat at a corner table, her attention focused on the tablet before her. Unaware of his arrival, the sight of her still affected him physically. Her deep, mahogany skin glowing against the ivory silk blouse she wore, her braided hair pulled back into an elegant updo that emphasized her high cheekbones and determined jawline. She looked up as he approached, her expression warming slightly. "Sebastian." "Wanda." He took the seat across from her, noting the stack of folders beside her tablet. "Working through coffee again?" "Elevation Fund applications." She gestured to the documents. 5 new businesses seeking financing this quarter. all minority-owned, all rejected by traditional banks, despite solid financials. Pride flickered across Sebastian's face. In the year since their divorce, Wanda had transformed her experience navigating white corporate spaces into Elevation Financial Consulting, a rising star in the financial world, dedicated to securing funding for minority entrepreneurs traditionally overlooked by venture capital. The Harmony Health Foods expansion moving forward? He asked. Genuine interest in his voice. Wanda's expression brightened. 5 locations now, with 30 new hires next month. She hesitated before adding, your brother's clinic partnership with them has been good for both sides. The mention of Trey, Wanda's protective older brother, who had never fully trusted Sebastian, carried weight. That Wanda would mention him voluntarily suggested progress in their cautious reconnection. I'm glad to hear it, Sebastian replied simply. Trey's always had good instincts about people, if not always about me. A hint of amusement crossed Wanda's face. He admitted last week that your youth program is probably not just for show. Coming from Trey, that's practically a ringing endorsement. Their conversation flowed more easily than it had in months, moving from their separate projects to industry developments. Sebastian found himself leaning forward, drawn in by her passionate description of a sustainable fashion brand she'd helped secure nationwide distribution. Wanda gestured expressively as she spoke, her intelligence and conviction more captivating to him now than during their marriage, when he'd been too focused on his own ambitions to fully appreciate hers. You've built something remarkable, he said when she paused. In just a year. Wanda's dark eyes studied him, weighing his sincerity. So have you. James Martinez's scholarship made the business section. The hard-nosed Sebastian Pemberton teaching coding to former gang members wasn't what anyone expected. Including me, Sebastian admitted. Turns out there's life after Pemberton Industries. A companionable silence fell between them, more comfortable than either would have thought possible a year ago. Their coffee cups sat empty, yet neither made a move to leave. We should, Sebastian began, just as Wanda's phone chimed with an urgent notification. Her expression shifted as she read the message. That's strange. Harmony just lost their expansion funding. The bank pulled out this morning with no explanation. Sebastian frowned. That doesn't make sense. Their financials are solid. It's the 3rd client this month facing sudden regulatory concerns. Wanda's voice carried professional concern, but Sebastian caught the undercurrent of personal frustration. These weren't just clients to her. They were people whose dreams she'd committed to protecting. As she gathered her documents, Sebastian felt the familiar spark whenever they connected professionally, her strategic mind matching his step for step. If you need any help looking into this, Wanda paused, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. I appreciate the offer, but I need to handle this myself. She stood, smoothing her pencil skirt. Thanks for the coffee. Sebastian watched her leave, struck by the elegant confidence in her stride. She'd always carried herself with dignity, but there was something different now. A woman who had rebuilt herself on her own terms. He respected her too much to push past her boundaries, even as he felt the pull to be closer to her again. His phone vibrated with a text from Remy Gibson, his longtime friend, who now served on BYTI's board while maintaining ties to the corporate world. Permit issues at the center. Code violations filed anonymously. Summer program at risk. Sebastian's jaw tightened as he read the message. 150 vulnerable teenagers who would otherwise be unsupervised during summer months depended on that program. The timing felt calculated, just as his students were receiving positive media attention. As he walked toward the subway, Sebastian couldn't shake the feeling that the challenges facing his center and the problems with Wanda's clients weren't coincidental. He didn't believe in coincidences anymore, not when they targeted the 2 things he cared about most. The financial conference bustled with the networking energy unique to gatherings of the ambitious and powerful. Sebastian adjusted his tie, a concession to the formal setting that felt increasingly foreign after months of his more casual Brooklyn wardrobe. He scanned the crowded reception area, nodding politely to former colleagues who regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. The man who had walked away from Pemberton Industries at the height of his success remained an enigma to most of them. Sebastian Pemberton, the prodigal son, returns to the financial temple. Sebastian turned to find Remy approaching with 2 glasses of sparkling water. His friend's immaculately tailored suit and easy charm hadn't changed, though the warmth in his eyes was genuine. "Just visiting," Sebastian replied, accepting the drink. "The BYTI panel on alternative funding for community initiatives starts in 20 minutes. Remy nodded. "Quite the shift from when you used to headline the merger and acquisition discussions." He glanced around before lowering his voice. "Any progress with the permit situation?" "Working through lawyers," Sebastian said grimly. "Someone's pulling strings with the zoning board. The summer program starts in 3 weeks, and we have 150 kids already enrolled." "Speaking of pulling strings," Remy gestured subtly across the room. "Isn't that your ex-wife's panel starting now? Breaking financial barriers for minority entrepreneurs." Sebastian followed his gaze to where Wanda stood at the entrance to a smaller conference room, greeting attendees with professional warmth. She wore a tailored navy dress that accentuated her curves while maintaining corporate polish. Her braided hair arranged in an elegant crown that made her seem taller than her 5'7" frame. "I didn't know she was presenting today," Sebastian said, though he wasn't entirely surprised. Their separate paths had begun intersecting more frequently as they each gained recognition in their respective fields. "Her firm's making waves," Remy commented. "The Elevation Fund hit 30 million in commitments last quarter, making certain people nervous." Sebastian's attention sharpened. What kind of nervous? The kind that comes when old money sees new players changing the rules. Remy shrugged. "You remember how the game works." Sebastian did remember. He'd been a master player before walking away, before Wanda had shown him the human cost of those games. "I should head to my panel," he said, eyes still on Wanda, as a tall, impeccably dressed man with warm brown skin approached her. The man placed a familiar hand on her arm, leaning close to speak in her ear. "That's Dominic Wells," Remy supplied, noting Sebastian's interest. "Major investor in her Elevation Fund. Contributed 5 million personally. Word is he's pursuing more than financial returns, if you catch my meaning." Sebastian kept his expression neutral, though something primal twisted in his chest. Dominic Wells represented everything he once had been: wealthy, connected, clearly attracted to Wanda. The difference was that Wanda now had the experience to recognize men who saw her as an acquisition rather than a partner. Or so he hoped. "Your panel's in the opposite direction," Remy reminded him with knowing amusement. Sebastian nodded and turned away, but not before Wanda glanced up and caught his gaze across the room. For a moment, something electric passed between them. Recognition, awareness, the ghost of what had been, and the possibility of what might still be. Then Dominic said something that recaptured her attention, and the moment passed. Sebastian's panel discussion on community investment strategies proved more engaging than he'd anticipated. The audience seemed genuinely interested in BYTI's model of teaching marketable skills while providing meals and mentorship. As he described James Martinez's journey from potential dropout to Google Scholarship recipient, Sebastian realized how much more satisfaction he found in this work compared to his former life of corporate acquisitions. He was answering questions from the audience when he noticed Wanda slipping quietly into the back of the room. Their eyes met briefly before she leaned against the wall, arms crossed, listening intently as he explained the center's impact on reducing gang recruitment in the neighborhood. When the panel concluded, Sebastian found himself surrounded by potential donors and community organizers. By the time he extracted himself, Wanda had disappeared. Disappointment settled in his chest as he gathered his materials. "Your students are fortunate to have such a passionate advocate." He turned to find Wanda standing behind him, her expression thoughtful. "They advocate for themselves," Sebastian replied. "I just removed some barriers." Wanda smiled slightly. The Sebastian Pemberton I knew wasn't quite so humble about his accomplishments. "The Sebastian Pemberton you knew wouldn't recognize the one standing here," he said quietly. Something shifted in her eyes, a softening, perhaps, or recognition of the truth in his words. Before she could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this," she said, stepping away to answer. Sebastian watched concern spread across her features as she listened to the caller. When she returned, her professional composure had slipped slightly. "Everything okay?" he asked. Wanda hesitated before answering. "Genesis Tech just lost their medical device patent funding. That's the fourth client this month facing sudden financial obstacles." Sebastian's brow furrowed. "That's the company developing affordable dialysis equipment for underserved communities, right?" Wanda nodded, genuine distress showing through her professional veneer. 20 jobs and potentially thousands of patients affected. She straightened her shoulders, compartmentalizing. "I should go." "Let me help," Sebastian said, before she could turn away. "This pattern sounds too coordinated to be coincidence." Wanda studied him, weighing his offer against their complicated history. "I'm meeting with the Genesis team over dinner to discuss contingency plans. You're welcome to join if you're interested." The invitation surprised him. "I'm interested," he said simply. 3 hours later, they sat alone at a corner table in an upscale restaurant, the Genesis Tech team having departed with renewed hope. After Sebastian suggested alternative funding pathways through connections Wanda hadn't tapped, their collaborative approach had yielded immediate results, reminding them both of how effectively they once worked together. "Thank you," Wanda said, swirling the remaining wine in her glass. "Your perspective was helpful." Sebastian watched the candlelight play across her features, softening her professional armor. "We always did make a good team." Wanda's expression grew contemplative. "Professionally, yes. The unspoken but not personally hung between them." Sebastian leaned forward slightly. "Wanda, what happened to us?" "Was a year ago," she interrupted gently. "We've both built new lives." "Have we?" Sebastian asked. "Or are we building variations of what we once wanted together?" The question lingered as their eyes held across the table. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to fade as the space between them charged with unspoken emotions and physical awareness that neither had fully extinguished. Wanda set down her glass, breaking the moment. "Sebastian, I appreciate your help tonight, but—" A commotion near the entrance interrupted her as a familiar figure entered the restaurant, scanning the room until he spotted their table. Trey Reeves, Wanda's brother, approached with purpose in his stride, his normally composed doctor's demeanor strained with concern. "Harmony's situation is worse than we thought," he said without preamble, nodding briefly to acknowledge Sebastian. "The funding pull affects the clinic partnership too. We'll lose access to their fresh food program for patients." Wanda straightened. "What? The contracts were signed last month." "Same language in the termination letter as the others," Trey said grimly. "Regulatory concerns requiring extended review." Sebastian watched the siblings, noting the genuine alarm beneath their professional exteriors. This wasn't just business for them. It was about communities they cared for deeply. "Mind if I see that letter?" Sebastian asked. Trey hesitated, his trust in Sebastian clearly still limited despite the year that had passed. But after a glance at his sister, he handed over his phone with the email displayed. Sebastian scanned the document, his former corporate instincts activating. "This phrasing is oddly specific, almost identical to language used in regulatory holds at Pemberton Industries." He looked up, meeting Wanda's concerned gaze. "Someone's systematically targeting your clients, and they're using corporate playbook tactics to do it." "The question is who," Wanda said, "and why?" As if in answer to her question, both their phones chimed simultaneously with alerts. Sebastian checked his screen to find an urgent message from Maya about new anonymous complaints filed against the youth center. Wanda's expression confirmed she'd received similarly troubling news. "We need to talk," Sebastian said, his voice low and serious. "Privately." The intensity in his tone must have conveyed the gravity of his suspicions, because Wanda nodded without hesitation, gathering her things. As they stood to leave, Sebastian placed his hand lightly on her lower back, a protective gesture that emerged instinctively. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. Outside, the spring night air carried a hint of coming rain as they walked toward Sebastian's car, their steps naturally falling into rhythm. When their hands accidentally brushed, both felt the jolt of awareness that passed between them, a physical memory of connection that neither time nor pain had erased. Trey followed a few steps behind, his expression thoughtful as he observed their unconscious synchronicity. Whatever was happening between his sister and her ex-husband, he recognized it wasn't over, despite his lingering reservations about the man who had once broken her heart. None of them noticed the dark sedan parked across the street, its occupant watching their departure with calculated interest before making a phone call. "They're together," the observer reported. "Just as you predicted." Sebastian's loft embodied the transformation of the man himself. Industrial beams and exposed brick, softened by comfortable furniture and warm lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Brooklyn skyline, the Manhattan lights glittering across the water like distant stars. Wanda moved to these windows, arms crossed as she processed everything Sebastian had just shared. The pattern of attacks against her clients, matched with the suspicious timing of permit issues at his youth center, painted a disturbing picture. "Someone with resources," she said, turning back to face him. "Corporate-level resources." Sebastian nodded, loosening his tie as he spread documents across his reclaimed wood dining table. "And knowledge of both our operations. The timing is too precise to be coincidental." Trey paced the open space, medical precision evident in his methodical thinking. "Motive is clear for targeting Wanda's clients. Disrupting minority business funding maintains the status quo. But why go after a youth center teaching coding to underprivileged kids?" Sebastian and Wanda exchanged a look, both arriving at the same conclusion simultaneously. "Because it's mine," Sebastian said quietly. "Someone wants to hurt both of us specifically." Wanda approached the table, studying the timeline Sebastian had constructed. Her proximity sent a subtle wave of her jasmine perfume toward him, the same scent she'd worn during their marriage. Sebastian forced his focus back to the documents. "The attacks on your clients started 3 months ago," he noted. "The center's permit issues began 6 weeks later, immediately after the Times profile mentioned your elevation fund as inspiration for our community investment approach." Wanda's eyes widened slightly. "After we were publicly linked." "Exactly." Sebastian turned to his laptop, bringing up a secure database. "I had Remy compile financial transaction records for your affected clients. There's a pattern hidden in the regulatory holds." As Sebastian worked, Wanda's phone chimed with an incoming text. She checked the screen and frowned. "Dominic again. Third time tonight? Your investor?" Sebastian asked without looking up, his tone carefully neutral. "He's been pushing for a merger with his larger firm. That says it would provide protection from market volatility." Her skepticism was evident. "Suddenly very interested in my client database." Sebastian glanced up, meeting her eyes. "Timing?" "Started 3 weeks ago," she acknowledged, "right after the first major client lost funding." Trey looked between them, witnessing their natural synchronicity despite the year apart. "I have patient data to analyze back at the clinic. Text me if you find anything concrete." He gave his sister a meaningful look. "Call if you need me." After Trey departed, the loft felt suddenly more intimate. Wanda slipped off her heels, padding across the polished concrete floor in a gesture of familiar comfort that didn't escape Sebastian's notice. "Your brother's still not entirely convinced about my rehabilitation," Sebastian observed, removing his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. Wanda's lips curved slightly. "Trey's protective. Always has been." She moved to the kitchen, opening cabinets with the ease of someone who once knew this space. "You still keep tea in the same place?" "Some habits don't change," Sebastian replied, watching as she filled the kettle and set it to boil. They worked in companionable silence for the next hour, analyzing patterns and connections. The easy partnership that had once made them formidable in the corporate world reasserted itself naturally. "Look at this," Sebastian finally said, pointing to his screen. All 5 affected businesses received funding through the same partner bank, which was recently acquired by Apex Digital's financial services division. Wanda leaned over his shoulder to see, her braids brushing against his arm. "Apex Digital? John Steele's new company?" "My mother's former right hand," Sebastian confirmed grimly, "who conveniently received a golden parachute the day I resigned from Pemberton Industries." Wanda straightened, processing the implications. "You think Steele is targeting my clients because of your history with him?" "It's possible," Sebastian said, though his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. But there's more. Look at this. He pulled up an encrypted file he'd extracted from Wanda's business server during their earlier security check, with her permission. The file contained fragments of code with a distinctive signature. This is a sophisticated tracking program embedded in your client database, Sebastian explained. It's been monitoring communication patterns, funding approvals, even your private emails discussing strategy. Wanda's expression hardened. Someone's spying on my entire operation. Not just anyone, Sebastian said quietly. This coding architecture is proprietary. I've only seen it once before, in Pemberton Industries' corporate intelligence division. The implication hung between them. Sebastian's mother, Pamela Pemberton, had built her reputation on ruthless competitive intelligence gathering. The techniques had always skirted ethical boundaries, but Sebastian had implemented stricter protocols before his departure. Your mother, Wanda said, her voice a complex mixture of anger and disbelief. You think Pamela is behind this? Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. It fits her pattern. Methodical, patient, maximum psychological impact. He met Wanda's eyes directly. And she never forgave you for being the catalyst for my departure. Wanda turned away, moving back to the windows. The rain had started, droplets streaming down the glass, distorting the city lights beyond. I wasn't the reason you left. You made that choice yourself. Because you showed me the truth, Sebastian said, standing but maintaining distance. About what I was becoming, about what the company represented. Their reflected images in the rain-streaked window overlapped, her smaller figure silhouetted against his taller frame, separate yet connected in the darkened glass. We need more evidence, Wanda said finally, practical as always, before making accusations against someone as powerful as Pamela Pemberton. Sebastian nodded, checking his watch. It was after midnight, the storm intensifying outside. It's late. You're welcome to the guest room if you want to avoid the rain. Wanda turned to face him, her professional demeanor softened by fatigue and the late hour. In her stocking feet, without the armor of her heels, she seemed more vulnerable, the woman beneath the successful entrepreneur. I should go, she said, though without conviction. Sebastian moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of amber in her dark eyes. Stay, he said softly. We have more to discuss, and the storm's getting worse. The silence between them hummed with unspoken history, memories of other nights, other storms, other moments of decision. Wanda looked up at him, searching his face for something only she could recognize. If I stay, she said finally, we're just working. Nothing more. Sebastian nodded, respecting her boundary. Of course. But as he turned to retrieve bedding for the guest room, the power flickered once, twice, then plunged the loft into darkness, as a transformer blew somewhere in the storm. Sebastian heard Wanda's sharp intake of breath. Still not fond of sudden darkness? He asked gently, remembering her discomfort from their shared past. I'm fine, she insisted, though her voice betrayed her. Sebastian moved carefully through the familiar space, finding his phone to activate its flashlight. The beam illuminated Wanda standing exactly where he'd left her, arms wrapped protectively around herself. Without thinking, he crossed to her, his free hand finding hers in the darkness. Come on, he said. I know where the emergency candles are. Her fingers curled instinctively around his as he guided her through the darkened loft. The simple contact sending awareness through them both. In the kitchen, he located candles and matches by phone light, setting them up around the main living area until a warm glow replaced the harsh beam. The candlelight softened everything, the loft, their features, the professional boundaries they'd maintained. Shadows danced across Wanda's face as she accepted the glass of wine Sebastian offered, a replacement for the interrupted tea. To unexpected reunions, he said, touching his glass lightly to hers. Wanda took a sip, studying him over the rim. Is that what this is? Sebastian settled on the couch, leaving comfortable space between them. What would you call it? Complicated, she replied with a hint of her characteristic directness. We're not the same people we were, Sebastian. No, he agreed. We're not. That might be a good thing. The storm intensified outside, rain lashing against the windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. The candles flickered with each gust of wind that found its way through the old building seams. Do you regret it? Wanda asked suddenly. Walking away from everything you built? Sebastian considered her question seriously. I regret what Pemberton Industries had become under my leadership. I regret not seeing the human cost of our corporate strategies sooner. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. I regret hurting you. I don't regret leaving. Wanda set down her wineglass, emotion flickering across her features. You never really explained why. Not completely. One day you were the ruthless CEO, the next you were donating controlling shares to a worker-owned trust and walking away from a billion-dollar empire. Sebastian was quiet for a moment, with organizing thoughts he'd never fully articulated. Do you remember that community clinic in Bedford-Stuyvesant? The one Pemberton Financial foreclosed on to make way for luxury condos? Wanda nodded. It had been their first major disagreement, her questioning the ethics of displacing a vital community resource, him defending the business logic. I went there the day before the eviction, Sebastian continued. Not to negotiate, to reaffirm my position that business was business. But there was this kid, maybe 14, receiving treatment for diabetes. His grandmother told me without the clinic, they'd have to travel 2 hours by public transit to get his insulin adjusted. His voice grew quieter. I heard myself explain why market efficiency trumped their needs, and I suddenly heard how I sounded. Like my mother. Thunder crashed closer, the storm directly overhead now. Wanda had shifted unconsciously toward him on the couch, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. That same week, Sebastian continued, I found documents showing Pemberton Industries had systematically blocked minority-owned suppliers from contract opportunities, including businesses you had championed. His eyes held hers in the flickering light. I realized I'd become exactly what you accused me of being, someone who saw profit margins instead of people. The man you married, not the man you left. Wanda's breath caught at his words. I never knew. I never told you, Sebastian acknowledged. Pride, maybe, or shame. And now? She asked softly. What drives you now? Purpose, he answered simply. The faces of kids like James who just needed someone to remove the barriers. Kids who remind me of Trey and you, growing up with all that potential and determination. Something shifted in Wanda's expression, recognition perhaps of the truth in his words. The distance she'd maintained softened as another thunderclap shook the windows, causing her to flinch instinctively. Sebastian moved closer, natural protectiveness overriding caution. Still hate storms? Wanda gave a small self-deprecating smile. Apparently some things don't change. Their proximity felt suddenly charged, the professional pretense worn thin by candlelight, shared memories, and the isolating cocoon of the storm. Sebastian could smell her perfume, see the pulse point at her throat, feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Wanda, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Her eyes met his, vulnerability and awareness battling with caution. This is a bad idea. Probably, he agreed, not moving away. The candlelight caught the moisture on her lips as she unconsciously moistened them. We have history. We do, Sebastian acknowledged, both good and bad. Mostly bad toward the end, she reminded him. Then perhaps we're due for something good. The moment suspended between them, fragile as a candle flame. Then Wanda closed the remaining distance, her hand coming to rest against his chest as she leaned forward. Their lips met tentatively at first, a question being asked and answered in the same moment. The kiss deepened as Sebastian's hand moved to her face, cradling her cheek with unexpected tenderness. There was nothing of the calculated seduction that had marked their early relationship, only raw honesty and rediscovered connection. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Wanda's eyes remained closed for a moment longer, as though memorizing the sensation. When she looked at him again, the professional mask had completely fallen away. I've missed you, she admitted quietly. More than I allowed myself to acknowledge. Sebastian brushed his thumb across her cheekbone, his touch reverent. I've missed who we could have been, if I'd been different sooner. The power flickered back on suddenly, harsh reality intruding on their candlelit moment. They blinked in the abrupt brightness, the spell not broken but altered. Sebastian reached to dim the lights, restoring some of the intimacy. Wanda shifted slightly, creating a small but meaningful distance. We should focus on the situation at hand. Our businesses are still under attack. Sebastian nodded, respecting her redirection despite the lingering awareness between them. You're right, professional first. They returned to the documents spread across the table, though the current beneath their interaction had fundamentally changed. When their hands accidentally brushed while reaching for the same file, neither pulled away immediately. When Wanda leaned close to examine evidence on Sebastian's laptop, he allowed himself to breathe in her familiar scent. Hours later, as dawn approached, they had constructed a compelling case connecting Apex Digital to the attacks on Wanda's clients. Sebastian had also identified suspicious financial transactions, potentially linking an anonymous donor to the suddenly appearing code violations at his youth center. We need access to Apex's secure servers, Sebastian concluded, rubbing his tired eyes. Their main office has physical security, but there's a charity gala next week where Steele is being honored. We could attend as a couple, Wanda finished his thought. Use the opportunity to access his private office network. Sebastian smiled slightly at how naturally they still completed each other's strategies. Exactly. Though it would mean publicly linking ourselves again. Wanda considered this, the professional strategist evaluating risks and benefits. It makes tactical sense. We're already being targeted together. Just to be clear, Sebastian said carefully, this would be strictly professional undercover work? A hint of amusement crossed Wanda's features. Of course, what else would it be? The question hung between them, laden with the memory of their kiss, of boundaries crossed and recrossed. Dawn light began filtering through the windows, painting Wanda's mahogany skin with golden highlights as she gathered her things. I should head home, she said. Change before my 9 o'clock meeting. Sebastian walked her to the door, their previous ease now complicated by anticipation and uncertainty. I'll begin arrangements for the gala, he said. Remy can secure invitations. Wanda nodded, pausing at the threshold. Sebastian, about last night? We can blame the storm, he offered, giving her an easy out. The candlelight, old memories. She studied him for a moment, then surprised him by rising on tiptoes to press a brief, decisive kiss to his lips. Or we can acknowledge that some things didn't end just because our marriage did, she said quietly. Good night, Sebastian. He watched her walk toward the elevator. Professional confidence restored with her heels and daylight. Good morning, actually, he corrected with a small smile. Wanda glanced back, something new and undefined warming her expression. That too. Friday evening arrived with the kind of anticipation that comes before calculated risks. The Apex Digital Charity Gala transformed the Metropolitan Museum's Temple of Dender into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers suspended from temporary rigging cast prismatic light across ancient stone, while New York's financial elite circulated in formal attire worth more than what most families earned in a year. Sebastian adjusted his bow tie, the familiar weight of his tuxedo a reminder of the world he'd left behind. From his position near a towering floral arrangement, he observed the calculated networking, the strategic laughter, the subtle power plays. Once he had moved through such spaces with instinctive dominance. Now he felt like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. You're 3 o'clock, came Remy's discreet voice beside him. Steele's just arrived with your mother. Sebastian turned slightly, catching sight of John Steele, silver-haired, distinguished, radiating the confident authority of a man accustomed to deference. Beside him stood Pamela Pemberton, elegant in midnight blue silk, her blonde hair arranged in the same immaculate coil she'd maintained for decades. They moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations for Apex Digital's philanthropic vision. The irony is breathtaking, Sebastian murmured. Steele receiving a humanitarian award while systematically destroying minority businesses. Appearances matter more than reality in this world. Remy replied. You taught me that once. Sebastian's response died in his throat as he caught sight of Wanda entering the gallery. She wore a deep burgundy gown that clung to her curves before flowing elegantly to the floor, the neckline offering a tasteful glimpse of smooth brown skin. Her braided hair had been arranged in an intricate updo, adorned with subtle gold accessories that caught the light when she moved. But it was her confidence that truly commanded attention, she navigated the predominantly white space with the serene self-possession of a woman who knew her worth in any room. "Your ex-wife cleans up nicely," Remy observed with characteristic understatement. "She was never the one who needed cleaning up," Sebastian replied quietly. As if sensing his gaze, Wanda turned in his direction. Their eyes met across the crowded space, a private current connecting them despite the distance. She offered a slight nod before making her way toward him, drawing appreciative glances from men who quickly tried to disguise their interest when they noticed her destination. "Miss Reeves?" Sebastian greeted her formally, aware of watching eyes. "Mr. Pemberton," she returned with equal professionalism, though the slight curve of her lips conveyed their private understanding. "Quite the gathering." "Indeed." Sebastian offered his arm, which she accepted with practiced ease. "Shall we?" They moved through the crowd together, presenting the picture of business associates reconnecting. But Sebastian was acutely aware of her hand resting lightly on his arm, the subtle warmth where her body occasionally brushed against his, the familiar scent of her perfume mingling with something new and distinctly her own. "Dominic's here," Wanda murmured, nodding discreetly toward a tall man in an impeccable tuxedo who watched them with barely concealed displeasure. "He's been unusually persistent about accessing my client database this week. After what we discovered about Apex's connection to your affected clients, that's concerning," Sebastian replied, leading her toward the bar. "Has he mentioned Steele or my mother?" "Never directly," Wanda said, "but he conveniently appeared in my professional life 3 months ago, exactly when the problems began." They accepted champagne from a passing server, using the moment to survey the room. Sebastian felt the familiar weight of his mother's gaze and turned to find Pamela watching them with cold assessment. When their eyes met, she offered a brittle smile before deliberately turning her attention elsewhere. "She's not surprised to see us together," Sebastian noted. "That's telling." "Steele's office is in the Eastern Corridor," Wanda reminded him, focusing on their mission. "Security rotation gives us approximately 7 minutes during his acceptance speech." Sebastian nodded, impressed as always by her strategic precision. "Remy's created a diversion for the security detail. We should. Sebastian Pemberton, the prodigal son returns." They turned to find John Steele approaching, crystal tumbler in hand, Silver Fox confidence in full display. His calculating eyes moved from Sebastian to Wanda and back again, with a sly smile on his lips. "John?" Sebastian acknowledged with professional neutrality. "Congratulations on tonight's honor." "Most unexpected," Steele replied smoothly, while Dominic stepped slightly closer to Wanda with subtle possessiveness. "Almost as unexpected as seeing you here together. I thought you'd both sworn off mixing business with pleasure after your previous complications." His gaze shifted to Wanda, assessment barely disguised as appreciation. "Miss Reeves, you're looking lovely tonight. I understand your elevation fund is making quite an impact." "In some areas," Wanda replied with equal smoothness, "though we've encountered unexpected regulatory hurdles recently." "The financial world can be treacherous for newcomers," Steele said, false sympathy dripping from each word. "Perhaps you need more experienced guidance." Sebastian felt Wanda's hand tighten slightly on his arm, not from intimidation, but from the effort of maintaining her professional composure. He shifted subtly, a half step forward, his body language communicating protection without undermining her authority. "Miss Reeves navigates complex financial waters with remarkable skill," Sebastian said. "Her clients are fortunate to have such a dedicated advocate." Steele's eyes narrowed slightly at the unified front they presented. "Indeed. Well, if you'll excuse me, duty calls." He raised his glass in mock salute. "Enjoy your evening. I suspect it will be illuminating for all involved." As Steele departed, Sebastian and Wanda exchanged a look of mutual concern. The encounter had confirmed their suspicions while raising new questions about how much their adversaries knew about their investigation. "We need to move now," Wanda said quietly. That felt like a warning. They made their way casually toward the Eastern Corridor, timing their approach to coincide with the beginning of the formal program. As planned, Remy created a diversion by accidentally knocking over an ice sculpture, sending security personnel rushing to contain the spreading water. Sebastian led Wanda quickly down the staff corridor, his hand at the small of her back, their movements synchronized with practiced ease. At Steele's office door, Wanda produced the security bypass device they'd prepared while Sebastian kept watch. 60 seconds, she murmured as the electronic lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside, Sebastian moved directly to Steele's computer while Wanda secured the door. Years of corporate espionage training, skills he'd once used for market advantage, now served a different purpose as his fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing security protocols. "Found something," he said, voice low. "Financial transfers through 7 shell companies, all ultimately connecting to the Pemberton Family Trust," Wanda finished, looking over his shoulder at the screen. "Your mother." Sebastian downloaded the incriminating files to a secure drive as Wanda photographed physical documents from Steele's desk, including a list of her clients with red marks beside those who had already faced regulatory action. "Sebastian," she said urgently, holding up a document. "Look at this." He moved to her side, scanning the paper she'd found. It was a strategy memo outlining systematic attacks against both their operations, with a timeline that extended back months before the first visible actions. Most disturbing was a notation beside Wanda's name: primary leverage point for SP compliance. Sebastian's jaw tightened as understanding dawned. "They're using you to get to me, targeting your clients to force me back into line." Wanda's expression hardened with righteous anger. Using vulnerable communities as pawns in a family power struggle. She shook her head in disgust. "Your mother hasn't changed, but I have," Sebastian said firmly. "We have everything we need. Let's go." They had almost reached the door when voices approached in the corridor outside. Sebastian pulled Wanda into the adjacent supply closet just as the office door opened. Through the thin wall, they could hear Steele and another man entering. "Dominic," Steele was saying, "your position is clear. Continue monitoring Reeves and her operation. We need complete access to her client database." "She's becoming suspicious," came Dominic's voice, "and now she's reconnecting with Pemberton." "That was anticipated," Steele replied dismissively. "Pamela predicted they'd join forces once they recognized the coordinated nature of our actions. It makes the endgame more efficient." The closet was barely large enough for one person, let alone 2. Sebastian and Wanda stood pressed together in the darkness, her back against his chest, his arms around her waist by necessity. Each breath brought awareness of their physical connection, even as they strained to hear the conversation beyond the wall. "And if they discover our involvement?" Dominic asked. "They already suspect," Steele said with chilling confidence. "That's part of the design. Sebastian's psychological profile indicates he'll attempt to protect Reeves by confronting Pamela directly. When he does, she'll present him with a choice: return to Pemberton Industries, or watch as everything he and his ex-wife have built crumbles systematically. And if he refuses? He won't," Steele said with certainty. "His protective instincts toward Reeves remain his primary vulnerability. Pamela has spent a year planning his return. She knows her son better than he knows himself." Sebastian felt Wanda tense against him as their enemies discussed using her as leverage. His arms tightened instinctively around her waist, an unconscious gesture of protection that she acknowledged by covering his hands with her own. The voices moved toward the door, Steele issuing final instructions before departing. When silence fell, Sebastian and Wanda remained motionless for several moments longer, processing what they'd learned while acutely aware of their intimate proximity. "Your mother is even more ruthless than I remembered," Wanda whispered finally, turning within the circle of his arms to face him. In the darkness, Sebastian could barely make out her features, but he felt her breath against his chin, her hands resting lightly on his chest. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "that you've been targeted because of me." "I'm a grown woman who made her own choices," Wanda reminded him, strength evident even in her whisper, "including the choice to help you investigate this." The closet felt increasingly smaller as awareness of their bodies pressed together overshadowed the danger outside. Sebastian's hand moved almost of its own accord to her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone in the darkness. "We should go," he murmured, not moving. "We should," she agreed, her hands sliding up to his shoulders. Neither made any attempt to leave as the tension between them built to breaking point. When their lips finally met, It wasn't the tentative exploration of their first reconnection, but something hungrier. Months of denial and years of unresolved connection combusting in the dangerous darkness. Sebastian's hands splayed across her back, feeling the warm skin exposed by her gown's low cut as Wanda's fingers threaded through his hair. The kiss deepened, her body arching against his, professional pretenses abandoned in the wake of adrenaline and reawakened desire. A distant sound in the corridor finally broke them apart, both breathing heavily in the confined space. Sebastian rested his forehead against hers, struggling to regain focus on their precarious situation. "When we get out of here," he whispered against her lips, "we need to talk." Wanda's soft laugh held equal parts humor and desire. "Is that what you want to do?" Before he could respond, the corridor outside fell silent. Sebastian cautiously opened the closet door, confirming they were alone before leading Wanda quickly back toward the main event. They slipped into the gala just as Steele was concluding his acceptance speech, applause covering their return. To casual observers, they appeared to be nothing more than former spouses maintaining civilized connections. Only the slightly mussed state of Sebastian's hair and the heightened color in Wanda's cheeks hinted at their closet encounter. "We need to get this information somewhere secure," Sebastian said, voice low as they moved toward the exit. Wanda nodded, professional focus returning despite the lingering awareness between them. "My place is closer." The loaded simplicity of her statement hung between them as they retrieved their coats and made their way outside. In the back of the taxi, they maintained professional distance, though their hands rested on the seat between them, fingers occasionally brushing in silent acknowledgement of what had begun. At Wanda's penthouse apartment, they spread the evidence across her dining table, forcing themselves to focus on the conspiracy rather than the electric current still humming between them. The sophisticated pattern of financial manipulation became clear as they connected the documents. A systematic campaign designed to destroy everything they'd separately built while maximizing psychological pressure. "They've been planning this since the day you resigned," Wanda said, tapping a timeline document. "Your mother never intended to let you go." Sebastian stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. "She sees my departure as temporary rebellion, not genuine transformation. In her mind, I'm still her son, her heir, her creation." Wanda moved to stand beside him, their reflections overlapping in the darkened glass. "What will you do?" "Confront her," Sebastian said simply. "End this." Wanda turned to face him, concern evident in her expression. "Alone, after what we just heard about her using me as leverage against you?" Sebastian's gaze remained on the city beyond the glass. "It's precisely because she's using you that I need to handle this myself." "That's not your decision to make," Wanda said firmly, the successful businesswoman who had rebuilt herself after their divorce clearly present in her tone. "This affects my clients, my business, my brother's clinic. I won't be sidelined in my own fight." Sebastian turned to her then, his expression softening as he took in her fierce determination. "I'm not trying to sideline you. I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection," Wanda countered. "I need partnership, something you once struggled to understand." The truth in her words struck home. Sebastian nodded slowly, acknowledging both her point and how it reflected one of the fundamental issues that had contributed to their divorce. "You're right," he admitted. "Old habits." Wanda's expression softened at his acknowledgement. "We face this together or not at all." The simple declaration seemed to shift something fundamental between them, a negotiation of new terms for whatever this reconnection was becoming. Sebastian stepped closer, drawn by her strength as much as her beauty. "Together, then," he agreed, his voice dropping lower as the professional discussion naturally evolved into something more personal. Wanda looked up at him, the determination in her eyes now mingled with something warmer. "Good. That's settled." But neither moved away as the atmosphere changed, the evidence temporarily forgotten as their earlier interrupted moment reasserted itself. Sebastian's hand came up to cup her face, a question in his touch that Wanda answered by leaning into his palm. "Wanda," he said softly, her name carrying a wealth of unspoken meaning. "I know," she replied simply. When he kissed her this time, there was no storm to blame, no adrenaline from a narrow escape, No excuse beyond the simple truth that they both wanted this reconnection. Her arms wound around his neck as his encircled her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened into something that acknowledged their shared past while creating something new. Sebastian drew back slightly, searching her eyes. "Are you sure? After everything?" Wanda silenced him with another brief kiss. "I'm not the same woman who left, Sebastian. I know who I am now. What I want." Her fingers traced his jawline, a gentle exploration. "The question is whether you're still the man who let me go." "I'm not," he said with quiet certainty. "That man wouldn't have deserved a second chance." Her smile was both tender and knowing. "Then stop talking." They moved together toward her bedroom, the evidence and conspiracy temporarily forgotten as they rediscovered each other with new appreciation. Sebastian's hands moved reverently over the curves of her body as he lowered the zipper of her gown, his touch conveying that this wasn't merely desire but something deeper, recognition of the woman she had become in their time apart. Wanda unbuttoned his shirt with deliberate slowness, her fingers tracing the contours of his chest as though relearning familiar territory. When she pressed her lips to his collarbone, Sebastian's breath caught at the dual sensation of remembrance and discovery. The burgundy gown pooled at her feet, revealing smooth brown skin and delicate lace beneath. Sebastian drew her toward the bed, his eyes never leaving hers as they crossed this threshold together. Not as the people they had been, but as who they had become. "You're beautiful," he murmured against her throat, the words simple but heartfelt. Wanda's fingers threaded through his hair as he traced the curve of her waist. "Show me," she whispered. Moonlight filtered through the sheer curtains, painting patterns across their skin as they came together with unhurried tenderness. Each touch, each kiss carried the weight of their history while creating something entirely new. Trust rebuilt through genuine connection, rather than calculation or strategy. When Sebastian entered her, Wanda's eyes remained open, holding his gaze in a moment of complete vulnerability and honesty that had been missing in their past. They moved together with increasing urgency, rediscovering the physical harmony that had never been their problem, even when emotional walls had divided them. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Wanda's head resting on Sebastian's chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns along her spine. The comfortable silence between them felt like its own form of intimacy, a stark contrast to the calculated interactions that had characterized their early relationship. "I missed this," Sebastian said quietly, his voice a gentle rumble beneath her ear. "Not just the physical, the connection." Wanda shifted to look up at him, her expression thoughtful in the moonlight. "We always had that, even when everything else was falling apart. The irony was that I felt most honest with you when we weren't talking at all." Sebastian brushed a stray braid from her forehead, his touch reverent. "And now? Now I feel honest with you in every way," she admitted. "That's new for us." He nodded, understanding the significance of her words. Their marriage had begun as a strategic alliance, the brilliant young black financial analyst and the powerful white CEO, each offering the other something they wanted. The genuine feelings had developed later, complicated by the calculated beginning. "We started backward before," Sebastian said, "built on strategy instead of truth." Wanda's finger traced abstract patterns on his chest as she considered his words. "And what are we building now?" Before Sebastian could answer, both their phones chimed simultaneously with urgent alerts, the real world intruding on their reconnected bubble. With reluctance, they separated to check the messages. "Maya," Sebastian said, reading his screen with growing concern. "The youth center's funding has been completely frozen. All accounts, including scholarship funds for the summer program." Wanda's expression hardened as she read her own message. Similar situation. All 5 remaining clients in the Elevation Fund portfolio just received identical termination notices. She looked up, meeting Sebastian's eyes. "They're escalating." The tender moment transformed into focused partnership as they rose from bed, retrieving scattered clothing with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, they were back at the dining table, reviewing the evidence they'd gathered while formulating a counter-strategy. "They're forcing our hand," Sebastian observed, scanning the new termination notices Wanda had received, "making us choose between confrontation or complete destruction of everything we've built." Wanda nodded, professional focus fully restored despite the intimate context they'd just shared. The timing isn't coincidental. They've been watching us, waiting for the right psychological moment to apply maximum pressure. Sebastian's expression darkened as the full implications became clear. After we reconnected completely, their eyes met across the table, both acknowledging the possibility that even this, their physical reunion, had been anticipated in Pamela's psychological strategy. The thought should have diminished what they'd shared, yet somehow it didn't. If anything, it strengthened their resolve. "I won't let her use what's between us as a weapon," Sebastian said with quiet intensity. Wanda reached across the table, taking his hand. "Then we take control of the narrative. We confront her together, on our terms, not hers." Sebastian interlaced his fingers with hers, their joined hands a physical manifestation of their unified stance. "Tomorrow morning, Pemberton Tower, before she expects us." Wanda nodded, decision made. As they returned to bed, their bodies found each other again, not with the rediscovery of their earlier connection, but with something deeper. Each touch an affirmation that what existed between them belonged to them alone, regardless of external manipulation. In the darkness before dawn, Sebastian watched Wanda sleeping beside him, her features softened in repose. Whatever his mother had intended by targeting them both, she had miscalculated fundamentally. The strategy had indeed brought them back together, but not as the people they had been. Instead, it had united two individuals who had grown separately, who now chose each other with clear eyes rather than strategic calculation. And that made all the difference. Pemberton Tower dominated the Manhattan skyline, its gleaming glass exterior reflecting the morning sun like a monument to corporate power. Sebastian gazed up at the building he had once ruled, memories flooding back as they passed through the revolving doors into the marble-floored lobby. "Having second thoughts?" Wanda asked quietly, noting his hesitation. Sebastian shook his head, his hand finding the small of her back as they approached the security desk. "Just remembering who I used to be in this building." The security guard's eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Pemberton, sir, we weren't informed." "My mother is expecting us," Sebastian interrupted smoothly, the mantle of authority settling over him with practiced ease. It was a lie, but delivered with such conviction that the guard didn't question it. "Of course, sir. The executive elevator is available." As they rode up to the penthouse floor, Wanda studied Sebastian's reflection in the polished elevator doors. He donned a tailored suit for this confrontation, armor for returning to his former kingdom. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable, his posture straighter, his jaw set with determination, his eyes focused with strategic intensity. "You still wear it well," she observed. "The power." Sebastian glanced down at her. "It's just a costume now, not who I am." "I know," Wanda said simply. "That's why I'm here." The elevator doors opened directly into the executive reception area, where a startled assistant rose from her desk. "Mr. Pemberton, Miss Pemberton is in a meeting." "She'll see us," Sebastian stated, striding past toward the imposing double doors that led to his mother's office. Pamela Pemberton was seated behind a massive desk of polished black granite, reviewing documents with John Steele when Sebastian and Wanda entered unannounced. If she was surprised by their appearance, she concealed it masterfully, her perfectly controlled features betraying only mild interest as she set down her pen. "Sebastian, this is unexpected." Her cool gaze shifted to Wanda, assessment in her pale blue eyes. "And Ms. Reeves, how interesting." Steele remained seated, though his posture tensed slightly. "Should I call security?" "That won't be necessary, John," Pamela replied, her voice cultured and precise. "My son and his ex-wife clearly feel their matter is urgent enough to warrant this dramatic entrance." She gestured to the chairs across from her desk. "Please, sit." "We'll stand," Sebastian said, his tone matching his mother's in control. Pamela's lips curved in a smile that never reached her eyes. "As you wish. To what do I owe this reunion?" Sebastian placed the flash drive containing their evidence on her desk. "A systematic campaign of financial sabotage against Wanda's clients and my youth center. Shell companies routing back to the Pemberton family trust, data breaches, regulatory manipulations." His voice remained level, though tension radiated from his tall frame. "Your signature methods, Mother." Pamela didn't touch the drive, her gaze steady on her son's face. Such serious accusations. And your evidence? Extensive, Wanda interjected, stepping forward, including documented transfers through 7 shell companies, all ultimately connecting to your trust. Quite thorough, but not quite thorough enough. A flicker of something, perhaps respect, crossed Pamela's features as she regarded Wanda. You've always been remarkably intelligent, Miss Reeves. I can understand why my son found you useful. That's enough, Sebastian said sharply. We're not here for games or insults. Then why are you here? Pamela asked, leaning back in her chair. Surely not for a confession or apology. We're here to end this, Sebastian stated. The attacks on Wanda's clients and my center stop immediately. The regulatory holds are reversed. The funding is restored. His eyes narrowed. Or the evidence goes to the SEC, the media, and every board member of Pemberton Industries. Steele shifted forward, concern breaking through his composed exterior. Pamela, perhaps we should. She silenced him with a raised hand, her attention never leaving Sebastian. And if I were to comply with these demands? What then? You return to your little project in Brooklyn, and Miss Reeves to her crusade for the disadvantaged? A note of contempt entered her tone. Is that truly the legacy you want, Sebastian? Teaching coding to former gang members instead of shaping global markets? It's more meaningful than what you built, Sebastian replied evenly. Pamela's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. What I built secured your privilege, the very privilege that allows you to play philanthropist while still living comfortably. She rose from her chair, her slender figure radiating controlled power. You think your transformation is complete? That walking away for a year makes you different from me? She laughed softly. You're still a Pemberton. You still move through the world with the confidence and authority that comes from knowing you belong anywhere you choose to be. That's not. It is, Pamela interrupted. You've simply redirected the same ambition, the same strategic thinking, the same drive for control. The only difference is the target. Her gaze shifted to Wanda. And your choice of partner, of course. Wanda stepped forward, refusing to be diminished by Pamela's tactics. If you're finished with the psychological assessment, perhaps we could return to the matter at hand. Will you comply with our demands, or shall we proceed with disclosure? Pamela smiled, genuine amusement in her expression. You truly are well matched. She returned to her seat, pressing an intercom button. Caroline, bring in the Elevation portfolio and the Brooklyn Youth Initiative files. Moments later, her assistant entered with 2 thick folders, placing them on the desk before departing silently. Before you make threats, you should understand exactly what you're dealing with, Pamela said, opening the first folder. The Elevation Fund received its initial $5 million in seed funding through Horizon Ventures, correct? Wanda's expression remained neutral. Yes, a legitimate venture capital firm. Owned through 3 holding companies by the Pemberton Family Trust, Pamela completed smoothly. Your entire operation was capitalized with my money, Miss Reeves. The revelation hit Wanda like a physical blow, though she maintained her composure. That's not possible. I vetted every investor. To the extent that public records allowed, Pamela acknowledged. But some walls are built to be impenetrable. She turned to the second folder. Similarly, the Brooklyn Youth Initiative received its primary grant funding through the Progressive Future Foundation. Sebastian's jaw tightened. A respected nonprofit with a 20-year history of community investment. Acquired 3 years ago and restructured under the guidance of Apex Digital's Social Responsibility Division. Pamela countered. Your noble endeavor has been funded by the very corporate interests you believed you were rejecting. The calculated revelation hung in the air between them. Sebastian and Wanda exchanged a brief glance, partnership evident even in this moment of shock. Why? Sebastian finally asked. Why fund the very operations you're now destroying? Pamela closed the folders with deliberate precision. Because I know you, Sebastian, better than you know yourself. I knew that walking away wouldn't satisfy you. You needed to build something that reflected your newfound conscience. Her voice held no mockery, only calculated assessment. And I knew that eventually you would recognize your true capabilities were wasted on such small ambitions. So you funded us to control us, Wanda concluded, the strategic logic becoming clear. I funded you to give you enough rope to discover your limitations, Pamela corrected. Miss Reeves, your elevation fund has helped what, 20, 30 businesses? Admirable, but a drop in the ocean of systemic inequality. Sebastian, your center serves a few hundred children in one neighborhood of one city. She leaned forward, intensity breaking through her composed exterior. With Pemberton Industries, you could implement global financial policies that would impact millions. True systemic change instead of these gestures. Sebastian's expression darkened. And this systematic dismantling of what we've built, that's your idea of persuasion? That's my demonstration of reality, Pamela replied coldly. Everything you've built exists because I allowed it, and it can continue to exist under the same condition. Which is? Wanda asked, though she already suspected the answer. Pamela's gaze fixed on her son. Return to Pemberton Industries as CEO. Implement your progressive vision on a scale that actually matters. Your youth center receives permanent funding. Miss Reeves' clients have their regulatory issues resolved, and her fund receives a $100 million expansion commitment. The offer hung in the air, its strategic brilliance undeniable. Sebastian would be able to maintain his ethical transformation while potentially creating far greater impact. Wanda's mission would receive resources beyond anything she could otherwise secure. And if I refuse, Sebastian asked quietly, then the regulatory issues become criminal investigations. Steele spoke for the first time. Funding irregularities at the youth center raise questions about misappropriation. The Elevation Fund's connection to Pemberton money creates appearance of self-dealing when combined with your renewed personal relationship. Wanda's expression hardened. You destroy the businesses of innocent people to manipulate your son? Collateral damage is unfortunate, but sometimes necessary, Pamela said dismissively. The businesses will recover once Sebastian makes the right decision. Sebastian moved to the window, looking out over the city he had once helped shape from this very office. When he turned back, his expression was resolute. You've miscalculated, Mother, he said quietly. You believe I'm still motivated by power, just redirected toward different ends. But walking away showed me there are things more important than impact, at scale. Such as? Pamela asked with thinly veiled skepticism. Integrity, Sebastian answered simply. I'd rather help one person with clean hands than millions through manipulation and control. Pamela's composure slipped momentarily, frustration flashing across her features. Don't be naive. There is no power without compromise, no change without calculation. Perhaps, Sebastian acknowledged, but there's a fundamental difference between strategic compromise and moral corruption. You never understood that distinction. He turned to Wanda, their silent communication needing no words. She nodded slightly, confirming their unified stance. Here's our counteroffer, Sebastian stated, returning his attention to his mother. Full disclosure of your manipulations, to the board, to regulatory authorities, to every client and funder. Yes, our operations will suffer temporarily, but Pemberton Industries will face federal investigation, share prices will plummet, and your carefully cultivated reputation will be destroyed. Pamela's eyes narrowed. Mutually assured destruction? That's your strategy? No, Wanda interjected. Accountability. Something you've skillfully avoided your entire career. Steele rose, alarm evident beneath his controlled exterior. Pamela, perhaps we should reconsider. If even a fraction of this evidence becomes public. Be silent, John. Pamela snapped, her focus remaining on Sebastian and Wanda. For the first time, calculation rather than confidence showed in her eyes as she assessed their united front. You would sacrifice everything you've built on principle? We would sacrifice everything we've built to prevent you from weaponizing it, Sebastian corrected. That's the difference between us, Mother. You see relationships, businesses, even your own son, as assets to be leveraged. We see them as values to be protected. A tense silence filled the office as Pamela considered their position. Finally, she spoke with cold precision. 24 hours. I'll have my attorneys review your evidence and prepare a suitable arrangement. Until then, nothing changes. Sebastian nodded once, recognizing that even this small concession represented a significant shift in power. We'll expect your call tomorrow morning. As they turned to leave, Pamela's voice stopped them at the door. Sebastian. One question. When did you discover the Progressive Future Foundation's connection to Apex? Sebastian met his mother's calculating gaze directly. 3 months ago. Surprise flickered briefly across Pamela's features. Yet you continued accepting their funding. I redirected every dollar to scholarship accounts for the students, Sebastian replied. Outside your control. Something almost like pride crossed Pamela's face before she masked it with cool indifference. You truly are my son. That's where you're wrong, Sebastian said quietly. I stopped being your creation the day I walked away. Outside in the elevator, Wanda finally released the tension she'd been holding, leaning against the wall as the doors closed. That was intense, Sebastian finished, loosening his tie. Are you okay? Processing, Wanda admitted. Finding out my entire business was built on Pemberton money isn't exactly a minor revelation. Sebastian's expression grew concerned. Does it change anything? Between us? Wanda considered the question seriously, her dark eyes searching his. It would have once, when I was still defining myself in opposition to your world. She stepped closer, her hand finding his. But I know who I am now, and who you are. The money doesn't change that. Relief softened his features as he interlaced his fingers with hers. We have 24 hours before she makes her next move. Knowing my mother, she's already formulating countermeasures. Then we should be doing the same, Wanda replied, professional focus returning, starting with protecting our most vulnerable stakeholders. In the lobby, they separated briefly, Sebastian to call Remy about securing the youth center's essential operations, Wanda to contact Trey regarding contingency plans for the clinic partnership. As they reconvened near the building's entrance, a familiar figure approached from across the lobby. Maya, Sebastian said with surprise. What are you doing here? His program director appeared uncharacteristically nervous, glancing between them with evident discomfort. I needed to find you. There's something you need to know. Her tone raised immediate alarms. Sebastian guided both women to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from curious ears. What's happened? Maya took a deep breath, professional composure temporarily abandoned. I wasn't hired because of my Harvard MBA or my coding experience. I was placed at the center to monitor your activities and report back to Apex Digital. The confession hung between them, Sebastian's expression hardening as the implications registered. You're working for Steele. I was, Maya corrected, genuine distress in her eyes. When I took the position, it was presented as corporate intelligence gathering, standard practice in the industry. I didn't know about the attacks on your funding or the permit issues until they happened. Wanda studied the younger woman with cool assessment. Why come forward now? Because of James, Maya said simply. And Tariq, and Letitia, and all the others. I've watched these kids transform over the past year. What Sebastian's built is real, and it matters. She paused, vulnerability breaking through her professional composure. My little brother was in a program like this in Detroit before gang violence took him. I thought corporate success would honor his memory better than community work ever could. I was wrong. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket, offering it to Sebastian. This contains every report I've sent to Steele, plus internal communications about the broader strategy against both your operations. When I realized Steele was using me to destroy the same kind of program that could have saved Marcus. She shook her head. Some lines you can't uncross once you see them clearly. Sebastian accepted the drive, his expression guarded. Why should we trust this isn't part of a larger manipulation? You shouldn't, Maya acknowledged. But verify the information yourself. You'll find details about Dominic Wells' role in monitoring Miss Reeves's operation. He's much more deeply involved than I was. She hesitated before adding, there's also information about how they've been tracking your personal reconnection. The gala, the coffee meetings, even your evening at Sebastian's loft during the storm. Wanda's eyes narrowed. They've been surveilling us? Maya nodded grimly. Everything's been documented and incorporated into their psychological pressure campaign. They even have photographs from the gala, including, she hesitated, your departure together. The implication was clear. Their intimate reconnection had been anticipated and monitored as part of Pamela's strategy. Sebastian's jaw tightened with controlled anger at this invasion of their privacy. Why risk your position by warning us? He asked Maya, still suspicious of her motives. Because I made a choice, she replied simply. between corporate advancement and actual human impact. The same choice you made a year ago. She straightened her shoulders, professionalism returning. I'll face the consequences of my actions, just like you've done. Before Sebastian could respond, Maya turned and walked away, her message delivered. He and Wanda exchanged a look of cautious assessment, both processing this unexpected development. Could be another layer of manipulation, Wanda observed practically. Possibly, Sebastian acknowledged, but it aligns with what we already suspected about surveillance. They exited the building, instinctively scanning for observers as they made their way to the street. The weight of Pamela's revelations and Maya's confession created a new urgency to their partnership. My apartment could be compromised, Wanda said quietly. And your loft. Sebastian nodded, hailing a taxi. We need somewhere secure to review Maya's information and formulate our next steps. Trey's clinic, Wanda decided. It's the last place they'd expect, and he maintains strict privacy protocols for patient data. As the taxi pulled away from Pemberton Tower, neither of them noticed Dominic Wells watching their departure from across the street, phone to his ear as he reported their movements. The community health clinic occupied a renovated brownstone in Bedford-Stuyvesant, its modest exterior belying the state-of-the-art equipment Trey had secured through grants and partnerships. In his private office, Sebastian connected Maya's flash drive to a computer isolated from external networks, while Wanda briefed her brother on their confrontation with Pamela. Trey's expression darkened as he absorbed the implications. So everything, my clinic partnership, Wanda's fund, your youth center, it's all been part of some elaborate manipulation? Funded to control, then targeted to leverage, Sebastian confirmed, eyes fixed on the screen as files loaded. Classic Pamela Pemberton strategy, just on a more personal scale. Wanda studied her brother's reaction carefully. Their relationship had weathered many challenges, including her marriage to and divorce from Sebastian. Trey had never fully trusted the former CEO, his protective instincts toward his younger sister remaining on high alert even after their separation. You don't seem surprised, she observed. Trey sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. Not about Pamela's manipulation. That tracks with everything I know about Pemberton Industries. I'm surprised by how well you two are working together despite everything. An uncomfortable silence fell as Sebastian looked up from the computer, his gaze meeting Wanda's across the room. Their reconnection, both professional and personal, hadn't been discussed with anyone else yet, existing in a private space between them. We have common interests at stake, Wanda said carefully. Trey's knowing look suggested he wasn't convinced by this professional explanation. Uh-huh. He returned his attention to Sebastian. What's on the drive? Everything Maya claimed and more, Sebastian replied, his expression grim as he scrolled through documents. Surveillance reports, psychological profiles, strategic planning memos. They've been monitoring both our operations since day one, documenting every connection, every vulnerability. He opened a folder labeled Personal Surveillance, revealing dozens of photos. Sebastian and Wanda at coffee meetings, at the financial conference, entering his loft during the storm, leaving the gala together. The systematic documentation of their reconnection felt like a violation. Their private journey reduced to data points in a manipulation strategy. There's something else, Sebastian said, opening another file. Communications between Dominic and Steele about Trey's clinic. Trey moved quickly to the computer, concern evident in his posture. What about my clinic? Sebastian's expression hardened as he read the document. They've been using patient demographic data from your partnership with Harmony Health Foods to identify which communities would be most impacted by their funding disruptions, maximizing collateral damage to increase pressure. That's impossible, Trey objected. That data is protected under strict privacy protocols. No one has access except authorized personnel. Wanda approached her brother, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Trey, when did Dominic first approach you about the partnership with Harmony? Confusion crossed his features, followed by dawning realization. About 4 months ago. He said he had connections to their board, wanted to introduce us. His expression darkened. He suggested the data-sharing protocol for identifying vulnerable populations, said it would help target resources more effectively. Sebastian and Wanda exchanged a meaningful look, the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. Trey had been unwittingly manipulated into providing the very information that allowed Pamela and Steele to maximize the impact of their attacks. "I gave them the weapon," Trey said quietly, the weight of this realization evident in his voice. "All those families depending on our services." "You couldn't have known," Wanda assured him, though she understood the professional guilt he was experiencing. "They specifically targeted you because of your connection to me." Trey's expression hardened with resolve. "Then let's make them regret it." He turned to Sebastian with newfound determination. "What's our next move?" The shift from your to our wasn't lost on Sebastian, who nodded in acknowledgement of this significant change in their dynamic. "We need to protect the most vulnerable stakeholders first, your patients, Wanda's clients, the center's students, then counterattack with everything we have." For the next several hours, they worked together, developing a comprehensive strategy. Trey secured alternate supply channels for critical medications and arranged emergency food access for affected families. Wanda contacted each of her targeted clients, establishing bridge funding through previously untapped sources. Sebastian coordinated with Remy to ensure the youth center's summer program could proceed, regardless of permit status. As evening approached, they gathered around a whiteboard covered with contingency plans and tactical options. The shared purpose had created a new dynamic between Sebastian and Trey, not quite friendship, but a functional respect built on common cause. "The SEC filing is our nuclear option," Sebastian explained, tapping a document they'd prepared outlining Pamela and Steele's systematic financial manipulation. "Once submitted, there's no going back. Pemberton Industries' stock will plummet, investigations will begin, and collateral damage will be extensive." "Including to our own operations," Wanda acknowledged, practical as always. "But we'll have secured the essentials by then." Trey studied the board thoughtfully. "What about the media angle?" "A coordinated release to selected journalists could shape the narrative in our favor." "Risky," Sebastian cautioned. "Pamela has deep connections throughout financial media. We'd need someone completely independent with enough credibility to withstand pressure." A notification chimed on Sebastian's secure phone, a message from Remy with unexpected information. His expression shifted as he read it, a new possibility forming. "Elena Torres," he said, looking up. "Financial journalist who left Pemberton Media Group after they killed her exposé on predatory lending practices 3 years ago. Now works independently, specializes in corporate accountability reporting." Wanda considered this option. Would she have the reach we need? More importantly, would she have the courage to take on Pemberton Industries? Trey added. Sebastian nodded with certainty. "She's been waiting for this opportunity. Remy says she's maintained extensive documentation from her time at the media group, including evidence of editorial suppression that would strengthen our case." A new plan began taking shape, one that balanced protection of their vulnerable stakeholders with strategic disclosure designed to hold Pamela and Steele accountable without destroying everything in the process. As they refined the details, Wanda noticed Sebastian stepping away to take a call, his expression growing increasingly tense as the conversation continued. When he returned, concern was evident in his features. James Martinez was just brought in for questioning, and he said grimly, "Accused of hacking into Pemberton Industries' financial systems." Trey straightened. "The scholarship student? That's absurd." "It's a message," Sebastian explained, anger barely contained beneath his professional exterior. "They're escalating beyond financial pressure to personal targeting." Wanda moved to his side, instinctively placing a supportive hand on his arm. "Can we help him?" "Remy's already contacted our attorneys," Sebastian replied, "but the damage is being done. James's scholarship is now in jeopardy, his reputation questioned, the psychological impact alone." He trailed off, the cost to the young man he'd mentored clearly weighing on him. The moment crystallized something fundamental for all three of them. This conflict had moved beyond professional territory into deeply personal stakes. Real people's lives and futures were being weaponized in a corporate power struggle. "This ends tomorrow," Sebastian said with quiet intensity, "one way or another." Trey nodded, newly committed to their unified approach. I'll continue securing alternative resources for the affected communities. Whatever happens with Pemberton Industries, these people will have what they need. As night fell, they finalized their strategy for the following day's confrontation. When Trey offered his guest room to both of them, acknowledging without words the changed relationship between his sister and her ex-husband, the gesture represented more than practical accommodation. It was acceptance, however cautious, of their reconnection. Later, in the privacy of the simple guest room, Wanda found Sebastian standing at the window, his reflection in the glass revealing the weight of responsibility he carried for those affected by his mother's actions. "James will be okay," she said softly, moving to stand beside him. "Your lawyers will clear him." "His record will be cleared," Sebastian corrected. But the experience itself, being treated like a criminal, his character questioned, his future threatened, that leaves marks that don't disappear with legal vindication. Wanda slipped her hand into his, understanding that his concern went beyond the immediate situation. "You're thinking about your own experience, the moment you realized what Pemberton Industries really represented." Sebastian nodded, grateful for her perception. "I had wealth, privilege, power to insulate me from the worst consequences of that revelation. James has none of those protections." "He has you," Wanda said simply. "A mentor who walked away from a billion-dollar empire on principle. That's worth more than any insulation wealth could provide." Sebastian turned to her, the genuine understanding in her eyes reaching past his carefully maintained control. For a moment, his professional composure slipped, revealing the emotional toll of watching someone he mentored suffer for his family's actions. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for all of it, for every person hurt by the Pemberton name." Wanda reached up to touch his face, her gesture gentle but grounding. "You're not responsible for your mother's choices, only your own." "And I chose you," Sebastian said, the simple declaration carrying layers of meaning beyond their current crisis. Then and now. Wanda's expression softened with understanding of what he was really saying. "Even knowing it made you a target?" "Especially then," he admitted. "Walking away from Pemberton Industries was the right decision professionally and ethically. But being honest about my feelings for you, that was personal courage I hadn't found yet." The confession hung between them, a vulnerability Sebastian would never have shown during their marriage. Wanda studied him in the dimmed light, seeing clearly how much he had changed from the calculating CEO she had divorced. "We have to win tomorrow," she said with quiet determination. "Not just for our businesses or the people who depend on them. For us, for what we're becoming together." Sebastian nodded, drawing strength from her resolve. "We will, whatever it takes." When he kissed her, it wasn't the passionate reconnection of the previous night or the adrenaline-fueled moment at the gala. It was something deeper, a promise between equals, a commitment to face whatever came next as true partners. As they held each other in the darkness, neither spoke of love or future plans. Such declarations could wait until the immediate battle was won. For now, it was enough to know they stood together. No longer the strategic CEO and his ambitious wife, but two people who had found their separate strength before choosing to reconnect. Tomorrow would determine whether that choice could survive the final escalation of Pamela's manipulation. But tonight, in this moment of calm before the storm, they found certainty in each other that no external force could undermine. Morning light filtered through the blinds as Sebastian finished his call with Remy, confirming that James had been released from questioning, though the damage to his reputation remained a concern. Across the kitchen, Wanda and Trey spoke in low voices while reviewing the finalized strategy they'd developed overnight. "Elena Torres is ready," Sebastian announced, joining them at the table. "She's been compiling evidence against Pemberton Industries for years. Our documentation is the missing piece she needed." Wanda nodded, professional focus evident despite the personal stakes. "And the SEC filing?" "Prepared but not submitted," Sebastian confirmed. "It's our leverage, not our first move." Trey poured fresh coffee for all three of them, his manner toward Sebastian noticeably warmer than before. "The clinic's emergency protocols are activated. Whatever happens with the Harmony Partnership, our most vulnerable patients will maintain access to care." The simple domestic moment, Three people sharing coffee while planning corporate warfare carried its own irony. A year ago, Trey had barely tolerated Sebastian's presence in his sister's life. Now they operated as allies, united by common purpose and mutual respect. Sebastian's phone chimed with an incoming message. His expression darkened as he read it. Pamela's moved up the timeline. She wants to meet in an hour. That's not enough time to implement all our protective measures, Wanda objected, instantly calculating the strategic implications. She knows that, Sebastian replied grimly. It's intentional pressure to force a disadvantaged negotiation. Trey stood. Decision made. Then we accelerate. I'll coordinate the community resource distribution from here. You two handle Pamela. As they prepared to leave, Trey surprised Sebastian by extending his hand. Whatever happens, I want you to know I see the changes you've made. They're real. Sebastian accepted the handshake, recognizing the significance of this acknowledgement from the man who had once been his fiercest critic. Thank you. That matters. Outside, the April morning carried hints of spring warmth as they walked to Wanda's car. Their professional focus remained sharp, though an undercurrent of personal connection flowed beneath every strategic discussion. We should assume she has counterintelligence on our preparations, Wanda noted as she navigated through morning traffic. Dominic likely reported Maya's defection. Sebastian nodded, his mind already moving through potential scenarios, which means she'll have adjusted her approach. The question is how? By targeting what matters most to us, Wanda concluded. Not just our operations, but the people we care about. The observation hung between them as they approached Pemberton Tower once more. Unlike yesterday's confrontation, today's meeting would determine not just their professional futures, but the welfare of everyone connected to their missions. In the elevator ascending to the executive floor, Sebastian reached for Wanda's hand. Whatever happens in there, he said quietly, know that I know, Wanda interrupted gently, squeezing his hand. Me too. The simple exchange carried all they needed to say in that moment. Acknowledgement of feelings too significant to be rushed before the coming confrontation. This time, Pamela was waiting for them in her office, standing at the window rather than seated behind her imposing desk. The change in positioning wasn't accidental. Everything Pamela Pemberton did was calculated for psychological impact. Right on time, she observed without turning. Always predictable in your punctuality, Sebastian. You moved up the meeting, he replied evenly. We're accommodating your schedule as requested. Pamela turned then, her elegant figure silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. Her cool assessment took in their united front, the subtle positioning that placed them as equals rather than his leading her. I see Ms. Reeves remains central to your strategy, she noted, as expected. Wanda met the older woman's gaze directly. Let's dispense with the psychological observations, Miss Pemberton. We're here to resolve this situation, not analyze each other's motivations. A hint of approval flickered across Pamela's features before she masked it with professional neutrality. Direct as always, very well. She gestured to the conference table where several documents were arranged with precise neatness. My attorneys have prepared 3 options for your consideration. Sebastian approached the table cautiously, years of corporate negotiations having taught him to expect carefully disguised traps in seemingly straightforward offers. Wanda remained beside him as they reviewed the documents together. Option 1, Pamela continued. Sebastian returns to Pemberton Industries as CEO with full autonomy to implement his vision for corporate social responsibility. The Brooklyn Youth Initiative receives permanent funding as a flagship philanthropic program. The Elevation Fund becomes Pemberton's diversity investment division with expanded capital and Miss Reeves as managing director. Sebastian's jaw tightened at the familiar strategy, offering everything they wanted professionally while ensuring they remained under Pemberton control. Option 2, Pamela continued when neither responded. Sebastian remains independent but accepts a position on the Pemberton board with oversight of corporate citizenship initiatives. The Youth Center and Elevation Fund receive restoration of all funding and regulatory clearances, plus 5-year guaranteed support packages. Wanda's expression remained neutral, though Sebastian could sense her analytical mind identifying the hidden constraints in each offer. And option 3? He asked, already suspecting its nature. Full mutual disclosure, Pamela stated coldly. We release evidence of the Pemberton Trust's connection to both your operations, creating questions about potential conflicts of interest in your renewed personal relationship. You release your evidence about our strategic interventions. The resulting investigations damage all parties, though Pemberton Industries will ultimately weather the storm more successfully than your smaller operations. The threat was clear: mutually assured destruction, with the corporation's superior resources ensuring it would recover, while their missions might not. You've presented these as our only options, Wanda observed. They're not. Pamela's eyebrow arched slightly. You believe you have alternatives my team hasn't anticipated? We know we do, Sebastian confirmed. Elena Torres. The name landed with visible impact, though Pamela quickly regained her composure. The disgruntled former journalist? Hardly a significant threat. The award-winning investigative reporter with 3 years of evidence about Pemberton Industries' editorial suppression practices, Sebastian corrected. Combined with our documentation of your systematic financial manipulation, it's enough for a Pulitzer-worthy exposé that even your media connections can't suppress. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Pamela's features. You would partner with Torres knowing the collateral damage to your own operations? We've secured our most vulnerable stakeholders, Wanda replied with quiet confidence. Have you? The implication was clear. They had prepared for the worst-case scenario in ways Pamela might not have anticipated. Sebastian could see his mother recalculating, adjusting her strategy to this new information. I see Maya's defection was more significant than we estimated, Pamela acknowledged. Though Dominic remains in place, I assume. Wanda's expression didn't change, though Sebastian knew the confirmation about Dominic's role still stung despite their suspicions. Your agents are irrelevant now. We've secured what matters most. Have you? Pamela challenged, moving to her desk and pressing the intercom. Send him in. The door opened to reveal Dominic Wells, his usual charming demeanor replaced by cold professionalism. More disturbing was who accompanied him. James Martinez, Sebastian's star student, looking confused and intimidated in the imposing corporate environment. Sebastian straightened, protective instinct flaring. James, what are you doing here? Before the teenager could answer, Pamela interjected smoothly. Mr. Martinez was kind enough to accept my invitation to discuss his future. Given the unfortunate legal questions raised yesterday, his Google scholarship has been placed under review. You had no right to bring him into this, Sebastian said, voice dangerously controlled. I had every right, Pamela countered. As the primary funder of your youth initiative through the Progressive Future Foundation, I have a vested interest in its success stories. James looked between Sebastian and Pamela, his young face reflecting confusion and growing awareness that he was being used as a pawn in a larger game. Mr. P, he said uncertainly, what's happening? Miss Pemberton said she wanted to help clear up the misunderstanding about the hacking accusation. Sebastian moved toward his student, placing himself subtly between James and Pamela. She did she? And what exactly did she offer you, James? James shifted uncomfortably. A full scholarship, not just to college, but graduate school too, and an internship at Pemberton Industries instead of Google. The manipulation was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty, using Sebastian's most successful student as both leverage and symbolic representation of his choice. Return to Pemberton Industries, or watch as his mother claimed even the young lives he'd helped transform. Wanda stepped forward, her professional experience guiding her approach to the overwhelmed teenager. James, I'm Wanda Reeves. We met at the center's scholarship celebration. The young man nodded, recognition dawning. You're the one who helped set up the minority business owner presentations. That's how I got interested in entrepreneurial applications for coding. That's right, Wanda confirmed with a warm smile that cut through the corporate tension. And that interest is what makes you valuable to both Google and Pemberton Industries. But right now, you're being used as leverage in a situation that has nothing to do with your talents or potential. James's intelligent eyes narrowed as he processed this information, looking between the corporate players with new understanding. This is about Mr. P leaving the company, isn't it? I read about it when I researched him after he started the center. Pamela's expression cooled at being so easily decoded by a teenager. This is about ensuring talents like yours receive the best possible opportunities, Mr. Martinez. Something my son's limited resources cannot guarantee. Sebastian watched James straighten, the poised confidence he'd developed over months of mentorship emerging despite the intimidating setting. This wasn't the uncertain former gang member who'd first arrived at the center. This was a young man who had discovered his own worth. "With all due respect, ma'am," James said with remarkable composure, "Mr. P already showed me the best opportunity. He taught me that my value isn't determined by which corporation wants to use my skills. It's about how I choose to use them myself." Pride surged through Sebastian as he witnessed James's growth reflected in this moment of ethical clarity. Pamela's strategy had backfired spectacularly. Instead of demonstrating Sebastian's limitations, she had showcased the true success of his mission. "James," Sebastian said quietly, "why don't you wait outside while we finish this discussion? Remy's in the lobby. He'll make sure you get back to the center safely." The young man nodded, casting a final thoughtful glance at Pamela before Dominic escorted him out. Once the door closed, the atmosphere in the office shifted palpably. "That was a tactical error, Mother," Sebastian observed, genuine disappointment in his tone. "Using a teenager as leverage is beneath even your usual standards." Pamela's composure remained intact, though a hint of defensiveness entered her voice. "I offered him genuine opportunities, more than your little project ever could." "What you offered," Wanda interjected, "was the same thing you've always offered Sebastian, material resources in exchange for moral compromise. James recognized it immediately, even if you didn't." Sebastian moved back to the conference table, gathering the option documents into a neat stack. "We're declining all 3 options. Here's our counteroffer. Complete withdrawal of all actions against our operations and clients, permanent non-interference agreements with independent oversight, and your resignation from the Pemberton Family Trust." Pamela's eyes widened slightly at the audacity of their demand. "You can't possibly believe I would agree to that." "We do," Sebastian confirmed calmly, "because the alternative is Elena Torres's exposé, SEC investigations, and criminal charges for corporate espionage and financial manipulation. You would destroy your family legacy completely?" Pamela challenged, genuine disbelief in her tone. "Everything your grandfather and father built?" "I would transform it," Sebastian corrected, "into something worthy of the talented people who actually create its value. The workers, the communities, the innovators like James." A subtle shift occurred in Pamela's demeanor, a reassessment of her son not as a rebellious heir, but as a formidable opponent who had outmaneuvered her. For perhaps the first time, she saw him clearly, not as an extension of herself or the Pemberton dynasty, but as his own man with his own vision. "You've changed," she acknowledged finally, "more fundamentally than I calculated." "Yes," Sebastian agreed simply, "I have." Pamela's gaze shifted to Wanda, analytical intelligence reassessing the woman she had once dismissed as a strategic marriage for her son. "And you're not the same ambitious financial analyst who married into our world for advancement." "I never was," Wanda replied with quiet dignity. "That was simply how you chose to see me." A long moment of silence stretched between them as Pamela absorbed the full dimensions of her miscalculation. These were not the same people she had manipulated before. They had grown separately and reconnected authentically, creating a partnership her psychological strategy had failed to account for. "I need time to consider your proposal," she finally said, professional mask firmly back in place, "and to consult with the board regarding potential leadership transitions." Sebastian recognized the tactical retreat for what it was, not surrender, but strategic repositioning. 24 hours, he stated. "After that, Torres publishes and the SEC filing proceeds." As they prepared to leave, Pamela's voice stopped them at the door. "Sebastian? One question." She hesitated, something almost vulnerable breaking through her composed exterior. "Was there ever a version of this where you would have returned?" Sebastian considered the question seriously, respecting its importance to her despite their conflict. "If you had approached me as a mother seeking reconciliation with her son, rather than a strategist reclaiming an asset, perhaps." The simple truth landed with visible impact. For a fleeting moment, Genuine regret crossed Pamela's features before she nodded once, dismissing them with a return to corporate formality. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Wanda released a slow breath. She'll counter again before the deadline. Of course, Sebastian agreed, but from a significantly weakened position. Their eyes met in the mirrored wall of the elevator, mutual understanding requiring no words. The battle wasn't over, but they had seized the advantage. More importantly, they had demonstrated the strength of their united front, to Pamela, to themselves, and to those who depended on them. In the lobby, they found James waiting with Remy, the teenager's expression brightening when he spotted Sebastian. "Mr. P, I wanted to make sure you were okay. That lady seems intense." Sebastian smiled, genuine affection for his student evident. "I'm fine, James, though I owe you an apology for being dragged into this situation." James shrugged with the resilience of youth. "It's cool. Actually kind of interesting to see corporate politics up close." His intelligent eyes studied Sebastian and Wanda with newfound understanding. "So you two were married before? And now you're fighting his mom together? That's some movie-level drama." Wanda laughed, the tension of the confrontation breaking at the teenager's blunt assessment. "That's one way to describe it." "Well, for what it's worth," James continued with the earnest wisdom of his 17 years, "you make a good team. The way you handled that situation upstairs, strategic." Sebastian placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Let's get you back to the center. You have a coding project to finish before Google comes to review it next week." As they left Pemberton Tower, Sebastian felt a weight lifting. Not just from the tactical advantage they'd gained, but from the living proof that his new path had created genuine impact. Whatever his mother believed about scale and influence, the transformation in young men like James represented success that corporate power could never match. 3 months later, Sebastian stood at the podium in the renovated warehouse that housed the Brooklyn Youth Technology Initiative, pride evident as he surveyed the assembled crowd. Students in navy hoodies sat front and center, their families filling rows behind them. Representatives from community organizations, corporate partners, and educational institutions occupied the remaining seats. "Welcome to Boity's first annual Elevation Showcase," he began, the name an intentional acknowledgement of the partnership that had transformed both his and Wanda's separate missions. "Today, these extraordinary young people will demonstrate the technical skills and entrepreneurial vision they've developed over the past year." In the front row, James Martinez sat with representatives from Google, his scholarship fully reinstated and expanded after the truth about the hacking accusations emerged. Beside him, 15 other students prepared to present projects that had already secured educational opportunities and corporate interest. Sebastian continued, "None of this would have been possible without our expanded community partnerships, particularly the Elevation Fund's integration of technical education with minority business development." His gaze found Wanda in the audience, elegant in a cream suit that complemented her deep brown skin, her expression reflecting professional pride mixed with personal warmth. Beside her sat Trey, whose clinic now served as a model for community health partnerships throughout the city. The past 3 months had brought significant changes to all their operations. As promised, Alina Torres had published her exposé on Pemberton Industries' systematic manipulation, though with a surprising twist. Sebastian and Wanda had allowed Pamela 24 hours to implement internal reforms before the story broke, creating a narrative of corporate transformation rather than simple condemnation. The resulting restructuring had seen Pamela step down as head of the Pemberton Family Trust, though she maintained an advisory role. Corporate governance reforms had been implemented under the oversight of an independent board, with John Steele facing criminal charges for his role in the more egregious manipulations. Most significantly, Sebastian and Wanda had created an integrated model combining their separate missions: technical education flowing directly into minority business incubation, creating a sustainable pipeline from individual skill development to community economic empowerment. "Before we begin the project presentations," Sebastian concluded, "I'd like to introduce the visionary leader whose Elevation Fund has created unprecedented opportunities for minority entrepreneurs throughout our city. Please welcome Wanda Reeves, who will announce our new business incubator grants. Applause filled the room as Wanda approached the podium, her professional confidence matched by genuine passion for their shared mission. As they exchanged places, their hands touched briefly, a small gesture that carried the weight of their journey from strategic marriage through painful separation to authentic partnership. "Thank you, Sebastian," Wanda began, her warm voice carrying easily through the space. "Today represents what becomes possible when we remove artificial barriers between education, entrepreneurship, and community development." As she announced the grant recipients, including Harmony Health Foods, expansion into 5 new locations serving food deserts throughout the city. Sebastian watched from the side, his pride in her accomplishments untainted by ego or control. What they had built separately had been meaningful. What they were building together transcended either of their original visions. Later, as students demonstrated their projects to impressed corporate representatives, Sebastian found himself approached by an unexpected visitor, his mother, elegant as always, but somehow diminished from the commanding presence she had once projected. "Impressive results," Pamela observed, surveying the energy and innovation filling the renovated warehouse. "You've accomplished more than I anticipated." Sebastian studied her, noting the subtle changes in her demeanor since their confrontation. "You didn't expect the collaboration to be so successful." "I expected it to fail," she acknowledged with unusual candor. "Or for one of you to dominate the other. True partnership wasn't in my calculation." Before Sebastian could respond, Wanda joined them, her expression professionally neutral as she greeted her former mother-in-law. "Miss Pemberton, I'm surprised to see you here." "I was invited by Mr. Martinez," Pamela replied, gesturing toward James, who was demonstrating his project nearby. "Apparently, he wanted me to see what real impact looks like." The subtle acknowledgement of their success registered with both Sebastian and Wanda, though neither allowed satisfaction to show in their expressions. "The trust reforms are proceeding as scheduled," Pamela continued, shifting to practical matters. "The board has approved the permanent endowment for both your operations with the independent oversight you requested." "Thank you for honoring our agreement," Sebastian said formally. Pamela nodded, her gaze moving between them with analytical assessment that had become habit over decades of corporate strategy. "You've built something significant," she observed. "Not just professionally." The comment hung between them, acknowledging the personal reconnection that had developed alongside their business partnership. Neither Sebastian nor Wanda responded directly, maintaining the boundary between their private relationship and professional interactions. After Pamela departed, Wanda turned to Sebastian with a raised eyebrow. "James invited her? Bold move." "He's never lacked courage," Sebastian replied with a smile. "That's why he'll go further than I ever did." The showcase continued into early evening, concluding with a community dinner that brought together students, entrepreneurs, healthcare workers, and corporate partners in a celebration of their integrated impact. As the event wound down, Sebastian found Wanda helping students clean up, her elegant suit contrasting with the practical task in a way that embodied her authentic leadership style. "Successful day," he observed, joining her in breaking down display tables. Wanda nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "Very." 3 new business launches confirmed, 6 additional scholarship offers, and Trey's clinic partnership expanding to 3 new locations. "Not bad for a couple of ex-corporate professionals who decided purpose mattered more than power," Sebastian said with a smile. Wanda's eyes met his, warmth replacing her professional focus now that they were relatively alone. "Speaking of couples," she began, a question in her tone. Sebastian understood immediately. Though their personal reconnection had deepened over the past 3 months, they had maintained separate residences while focusing on rebuilding their operations and establishing the new partnership model. Neither had pushed for formal definition of what was developing between them, respecting the need for space after their complicated history. "Trey asked me yesterday if we were officially back together," Sebastian admitted. "Said he needed to know whether to expect me at Sunday dinners permanently." Wanda laughed softly. "And what did you tell him?" "That it was a conversation I needed to have with you, not him," Sebastian replied. He set down the folding table he'd been collapsing, turning to face her fully. "So I'm having it now. Where do you see this going, Wanda?" She considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "We're not the same people who married before. I'm not looking for what we had then." "Neither am I," Sebastian agreed. "That relationship was built on strategic alignment and physical attraction. We've both grown beyond that." Wanda nodded, setting aside her task to give the conversation her full attention. "What we've built professionally these past months works because we're true partners, equal, independent, choosing to align our separate strengths toward common purpose." "And personally?" Sebastian asked quietly. A smile touched Wanda's lips as she stepped closer. "Personally, I think the same principles apply. Two whole people choosing each other because they want to, not because they need to, or because it serves some external purpose." Sebastian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "So what are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying," Wanda replied with characteristic directness, "that I love who you've become and who we are together, not who we were trying to be before." The simple declaration, free from calculation or strategy, represented everything that had changed in their relationship. Sebastian drew her closer, his expression revealing emotions he no longer felt compelled to conceal. "I love you too," he said quietly, "not as an extension of myself or a strategic partner. Just you, exactly as you are." When they kissed, it carried none of the complicated history or power dynamics that had characterized their marriage. This was a beginning rather than a return. Two people who had found their separate worth, choosing to build something new together. Later that evening, they walked along the Brooklyn Promenade, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the water. Pemberton Tower stood among the skyscrapers, its illuminated spire a reminder of the world Sebastian had left behind and the new path they had forged together. "Move in with me," Wanda said suddenly, breaking their comfortable silence. "Not because it's practical for our work, just because I want to wake up with you every morning." Sebastian smiled, drawing her closer against the evening breeze. "Just like that? No strategic analysis of the pros and cons?" "None," Wanda confirmed with a laugh. "Just the simple truth that I'm happier with you than without you." "In that case," Sebastian replied, "yes." As they continued their walk, the future stretching before them held both challenges and possibilities. The integrated model they'd created would require constant refinement. Pamela's corporate reforms would need ongoing monitoring. Communities depending on their programs would continue facing systemic barriers beyond their immediate influence. But they would face it all as true partners, personally and professionally, their separate journeys having prepared them for a connection based on authentic choice rather than strategic calculation. Whatever came next, they would meet it together, their love strengthened by the very challenges designed to tear them apart. Some second chances aren't about returning to what was, but building something entirely new from the wisdom that only comes through loss and redemption. Sebastian and Wanda discovered that true connection isn't found in perfect circumstances, but in imperfect choices made with complete honesty. Their enemies believed manipulating their reconnection would destroy them both, never understanding that authentic love, once found, refuses to be calculated or controlled. Perhaps the greatest victory wasn't exposing the conspiracy that targeted them, but choosing truth over comfort, transparency over protection, and the messy reality of genuine partnership over the illusion of perfect romance. They learned that paths back to someone's heart aren't found through the same routes that once led away from it, but through the courage to become better versions of themselves first. I'd like to know, what's the most important lesson you've learned from a second chance at love? Was it worth the risk of being hurt again? Share your wisdom in the comments below. If this journey of hearts finding their way back to each other touched your soul, please hit that subscribe button and join our royal story family. Tomorrow we'll explore another passionate tale of love conquering impossible odds. Until then, remember that the most beautiful connections often grow from the broken places where light first found its way in.